Hello, fellow fight fans, and welcome to the Untitled Fightcast number 017. I'm your host, Zephyr Corvo, and we have a lot of exciting news this week to get into. We'll be talking about UFC 249, Fight Island, and what's to come in the weeks ahead during this global pandemic. So, wrap up, lock in, and let's get it started. So, first of all, I'd like to start off with this crazy, weird, mysterious Fight Island. And here's what we know so far, according to Dana White. It will supposedly be up and running by June. There will indeed be hotels for the fighters to stay in and some kind of training facility. But for me, the strangest thing that Dana has said is that the octagon itself will be on the beach. And this to me raises some questions. First off, how are they going to keep sand off of the octagon canvas? I mean, sand does blow around when it's a windy day. And what if it is indeed an extra windy day? Are they going to be fighting out there with large gusts of wind? How is that going to affect the fighters? What about being in the sun with the canvas getting hot? Are they going to have to ice down the canvas in between rounds or between fights? I mean, these are serious questions that just haven't been answered yet. And while the specifics of this beachside octagon have not yet been discussed, what has been talked about is that when the world goes back to normal, Fight Island will more than likely be retired, which to me seems weird after putting in all this work. Why not go back from time to time? Look, this is just one guy's opinion, but if you're going to spend all this time, energy, and money setting up Fight Island, why retire it when the pandemic's over? What if there's another pandemic? You never know. Now you have to set up an entirely new Fight Island. I'm just saying. As for UFC 249, it'll take place in VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena in Jacksonville, Florida, as it's one of the first states to start reopening some of its businesses. Florida has also, in fact, said that professional sports and media production with a national audience are indeed essential businesses during a global pandemic. And while I might not necessarily agree with that, what this does mean is that unlike it would have been at Tachi Palace, this event will be overseen by an actual athletic commission. That also means that we will have top-tier refs and judges to get the job done right. And speaking of getting the job done right, the matchmakers at the UFC, including Dana White, have really pulled through on this one with one of the single most stacked cards we've seen in a very long time. Early on in the prelims, we have one of my favorite rising stars, Bryce Mitchell, in the second fight of the evening. We have Vicente Luque fighting, but we have plenty of fights on this card, including the prelims, that could actually easily be main events. Let's start off with Uriah Hall versus Jacare Souza. Again, that could be a main fight in itself. Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson. That's going to be super great. The rematch between Donald Cerrone and Anthony Pettis is headlining the prelims. And I think the last time those two fought, it was the main event of the evening. And the way that fight ended is because Donald Cerrone, who is a veteran of the sport, decided to blow his nose and get a bunch of air in his eye socket. It just swelled up to enormous proportions. He couldn't see. They had to stop the fight. And so I'm really, really happy they're running that back. With Donald's recent track record, I do think that Pettis is going to win it. And that's going to make me sad to see Donald lose. Again, he's on this sort of downward trajectory, and it makes me sad because Donald is one of my favorite fighters, but he's actually taking some time off between the last fight and this fight, more so than he was last year. So I don't know. Ngannou versus Rosenstrike, that was scheduled to be a main event, and that is the third to last event of the evening. That being said, since it's not a main event anymore, it's only going to be 3 rounds, which does change the dynamic of the fight. As for who's actually going to win, I don't know. I'd put my money on Ngannou, but at the same time, the way Rosenstrike was able to basically explode Alistair Overeem's face in the last 10 seconds of a 25-minute match, with it only being 15 minutes, he's definitely going to carry his power through through the entirety of the match. After that, we have our 2 championship fights. The first one being between Henry Cejudo and Dominic Cruz, which is hands down going to be one of the very best fights of the night. Dominic Cruz coming off a 3-year layoff, but he's one of the few fighters that doesn't believe in ring rust, and this is not the first time he's come back after a long layoff. The first time he did it was after 3.5 years and after a shoulder surgery. That being said, after that, we have the main event between Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje. This is finna to be a barn burner. I do give a slight edge to Tony, only because Justin leaves himself open to get hit, although Tony doesn't necessarily have the one-punch knockout power that Justin has, and Tony has also gotten caught here and there. So I think it's pretty much a toss-up match with the slightest of edges towards Tony. And the winner of that fight will be the first one in line to fight Khabib come September after he's finished with Ramadan. Now, with all that being said, Dana White has expressly stated that he's doing everything he can to keep the fighters and his staff safe. Everyone will be tested for COVID-19. The fighters will still get their physicals and drug tests, as there was indeed a rumor floating around that there wouldn't be drug tests during the pandemic. And in terms of media members, there will be no more than 10 media members allowed to attend the event. And as for how many people are going to be in the same room, this, that, and the other thing, we don't have specifics on that. I'm pretty sure the announcers are going to be in a different room or in a media truck. I do believe each fighter is only allowed one corner man, and they'll come in, do their walk-in fight, and then be walked out of the arena. And overall, it does seem that Dana White and the UFC are taking every precaution they can just to keep everyone safe. The fighters, the staff, everything. They said it's going to be very similar to how they ran the event back in Brazil, but with even less people. And since I forget to do this every week, I'll be bringing you a Joe Rogan moment of the week this week. And this is a moment where, once again, Joe just doesn't know exactly what to say. And so he just kind of says the first thing that comes to his mind.
All right, now Eddie Ruiz got him. Got him in sort of the, whatever you call it, position, 69.
Oh, Joe Rogan, you precious, precious human being, you. Now, some of you might remember last week when I said that the UFC is contractually obligated to put on a certain number of events with ESPN. And so I was hoping that when they come back into action that we might get, let's say, 2 cards a week. Well, it looks like for the time being, that is indeed true. After UFC 249 on the 9th, we will have 2 fight nights, one on the 13th and one on the 16th, both also taking place in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, there's nothing scheduled after that, as the UFC probably doesn't want to get too ahead of schedule because you never know how things are going to change overnight. There's also, as of now, no reported fighters on those cards, just that the events are scheduled for those dates. ESPN has in fact gone on the record, though, saying that sports are an important part of people's lives, and so apparently they're all in on this just so long as the UFC is putting on shows under the right conditions, not like what they were going to do at the Tachi Palace back on the 18th of April. With it not being sanctioned and overseen by the California Athletic Commission and them not having the top tier refs and judges and trying to use tribal land to skirt around state laws that are currently in place. It seemingly left a bad taste in ESPN and Disney's mouths, but now with Florida opening up to certain businesses, it seems like they're all for it. So yeah, we have a lot to look forward to, and kudos to Dana White and his team of employees for doing what had to be done to get this thing up and running. Only time will tell if it'll all stay together in one piece or if it'll all fall apart due to an ongoing global pandemic. But one thing is for certain, there is no giving up over at the UFC. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in and supporting the Untitled Fightcast. Ring that bell down below if you want to stay updated on this or any of the content I post here on this channel. This has been Zephyr Corvo for the Untitled Fightcast, and I will talk to y'all in next week's episode.